10,000 years later, the Earthlings, Zhou Yuan, were brought to the end of the Han Dynasty and the Three Kingdoms period by the turbulent flow of time and space aboard his Mars mining spacecraft. Transforming the human training module. Future crop seeds. Various industrial machines. Various blueprints from World War I to modern weapons. He will shuffle this era belongs to heroes. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Crossing the Late Han Dynasty. Spaceship. Genes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Little love, where are we now? Is it on Earth? Zhou Yuan said. Based on the scanning of the surrounding environment, we have analyzed that this place is the Earth 10,000 years ago, which is the end of the Han Dynasty and the Three Kingdoms period in Chinese history. How did we get here? We've been mining on Mars all along, haven't we? Zhou Yuan said. We may have encountered a spatio-temporal storm being swept into other timelines, which is difficult for modern human science to explain. As an intelligent AI created by humans, I also cannot explain this scientific phenomenon. Damn it, what can you do? Damn it, how should I go back? Zhou Yuan stuffed his phone into his pocket and shouted angrily at the farmland ahead. A blue spaceship was parked behind him. This spaceship is like a small mountain, floating behind him at this moment, blowing strong winds. Zhou Yuan lifted his head and looked ahead. In his line of sight was a small town located on the plain, and he could only see the outermost few houses. Traveling back to the era of the Han Dynasty. But traveling through this era doesn't have much charm for me. Can I possibly claim to be king and emperor here? Zhou Yuan's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and he had no such thoughts. Of course, it was true that he couldn't go back now. Since that was the case, there was no other way but to stay here temporarily. He must figure out what era it is now. Although he knows it was the Great Han Dynasty, there were also many emperors in the Great Han Dynasty. He must figure out which Han Dynasty emperor is currently in power, so that he can roughly understand what will happen in the next few years. He released the drones on the spacecraft, which were already nuclear-powered drones. They were all white and had ASCII.FI aesthetic, not like stiff drones, but more like bees one after another. They fly rapidly towards the distance, and they can actually reach any position on this planet without worrying about their signal reception or energy issues. Their signal reception should have corresponding advanced chips, and energy issues should be addressed. Nuclear power generation. There's nothing to explain, right? A bee flew towards Chang'an. The location in Chang'an should have the capital of the Han Dynasty, but when I flew there, I found that there were no imperial palaces of the Han Dynasty, at least no buildings like those in the palaces. Surrounded by low houses, there was a pastoral atmosphere. Then fly over to Luoyang and take a look. The bee drone flew into the area of Chang'an City and saw the towering city walls and sparse crowds from afar. Continuing forward, the bee flew into the distinctive palace buildings. According to the analysis of historical materials in the database, it is highly likely that this place was the Luoyang Imperial Palace in the late Han Dynasty. Zhou Yuan listened to Chao AI's introduction and nodded. In the late Han Dynasty, it was not far from the Three Kingdoms. Perhaps I will encounter historical figures like Liu Bei, Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Cao Cao, and Sun Quan. In such a chaotic world, how can I operate to quickly establish an industrial country? But what can be certain is, Zhou Yuan did not intend to establish his own industrial country on the land of the Central Plains during the Han Dynasty. The land suitable for quickly establishing an industrialized country is actually the area of Baimizu. Zhou Yuan retrieved the bees and only installed a surveillance camera inside the palace of Emperor Zhao of Han, directly facing his bed. He did nothing else. Then he retrieved the bee. When Zhou Yuan was retrieving the bees, he suddenly realized that he had a very urgent task to do. His manpower is running low, and he must create genetically modified clones to fill the population under his command. He cannot be a bare rod commander. Whatever he does in the future, these genetically modified clones will be needed. He stood up and walked towards the spacecraft ahead, entering the interior of the spacecraft. There were a total of 3 levels, and the level he reached as soon as he entered was the cockpit. In this cockpit, he could pilot the spacecraft to take off, release drones, or some operational wingmen. The second layer, also known as the highest level, is an ecological zone where seeds and the entire farmland that has been opened up are stored. The wheat seeds that thrive in this farmland have undergone hundreds of genetic modifications. Zhou Yuan carried these seeds forward in the universe, so he didn't have to be afraid of starving or thirsty one day. He flew through the universe with farmland, which is only something that future people born and raised in the Central Plains region would do. The brain hole is quite large. The lower level of the cockpit is a cultivation chamber that can cultivate some animals and various templates of humans. In this cultivation chamber, you can use biotechnology to create humans. Of course, these humans are not real humans and do not have the ability to think independently. They are more like physical robots than humans. Lack of creativity, unable to independently invent and associate, can only rely on the information provided in the brain to do things. Zhou Yuan creates these transformation people by simply putting the materials into the incubator and then inputting the digital seed on the main control computer of the incubator to generate the transformation person. Of course, if you are too lazy to input the digital seed, you can also let it randomly generate a segment of numbers. Zhou Yuan currently has 20 training centers in his hands, which can cultivate 20 people every day and 600 people in a month. It should be noted that these 600 people are all adults. And these 600 people are definitely people with advanced knowledge. Their brain memories can be downloaded online and then loaded into their brains, without the need to learn like ordinary humans, and can be quickly completed. Their age starts from their birth and ends 80 years after their birthday, with an average age of 80 years. 600 yuan per month, 6,000 yuan per 10 months, and 60,000 people per 10 years. 60,000 top intellectuals. It's scary, isn't it? Zhou Yuan wiped the corners of his mouth clean, but he couldn't create a new cultivation chamber himself, so he had to work as a production and transformation worker at 20 a day. About 3 hours later, the door of the cultivation chamber opened and Zhou Yuan watched as several men and women slowly walked out amidst the smoke emanating from the chamber. Zhou Yuan said, "You can give yourself any name you like. Among you are mineral experts, technical personnel who manufacture steam engines, and combat personnel. My requirement for you is to set up a workshop to make iron, steam engines, and agricultural tools." Chapter 2. Establishing Xinzhuang. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 20 people left the spacecraft and headed to the mountains behind, carrying the multifunctional wristbands distributed to them by Zhou Yuan. The area where Zhou Yuan is located is the Bashu region, which has more mountains and minerals than the plain areas, right? Probably. Zhou Yuan watched from a distance as a group of people were busy. The multifunctional bracelet can shoot lasers, making it easy to cut down trees and transform people with great strength, lifting the entire tree stump on their shoulders. Built a wooden house, built it with stones wrapped around a rammed earth structure. Put a torch on the house and add some light to it. Reclaiming farmland, planting seeds, and using special fertilizers, the seeds grow wheat with bent branches within 3 hours. The golden wheat fields cover approximately 4 to 5 acres. They built many houses here, and then some people began to go out of work. They used the genetic coding function of spacecraft to recode ordinary stones. The quality of iron ore in East Asia is actually not good. One day, if the good iron ore producing area in Australia is shut down, the quality of iron ore will increase. We cannot always use things like spaceships to produce steel, which is not very technically advanced. In the future, spacecraft will only manufacture precious metals and substances used for nuclear power generation. Temporarily produce some black powder. Then make the black powder version of the fixed ammunition. Since we know the history of later generations, we can directly create the most primitive rear-mounted bolt gun. However, the details of these things have to be handed over to those who transform them. Zhou Yuan's understanding of the development process of this civilization is like playing in the era of empires. Just click with the mouse, and the next step is to wait for the successful development process. Zhou Yuan will wait for some life-saving measures before entering the distant village from the corner of this plain. After about 7 days, he led over 100 gene clones to this village. People come and go in tattered linen clothes because it's in the south, so the weather is very hot and everyone wears shorter clothes, which can save fabric. Smelling the unique smell of cow dung, Zhou Yuan couldn't help but frown tightly. I forgot to ask Xiao AI, which region in history are we located in, which warlord's territory of the three kingdoms? Zhou Yuan said. Xiao AI's voice came. You are currently within the territory of Yizhou, and the warlord ruling this land is Zhang Yu. This warlord seems to be a god. Mind him, give him a fight first before we talk. Zhou Yuan came to the landlord's house in this village, because the Eastern and Western Han dynasties implemented private ownership of land. The local landlords had great power and could already be said to be the local emperors. The courtyard built by the small landowners in this impoverished village is simply out of place with the entire village's artistic style. I am Mr. Wulong's disciple, Zhou Yuan. Today, I led my group of students through a precious land and wanted to visit the local sages. Could the gatekeeper please go inside and pass on your master, Zhou Yuan, to visit? Zhou Yuan was dressed in Han Dynasty clothing, and over 100 gene clones behind him were also wearing the same clothes. They all had good looks, bright eyes and good teeth, and carried a scholarly demeanor. The gatekeeper was startled and immediately became nervous. Seeing nearly 100 people carrying a scholarly aura, I inexplicably thought of the story that my grandfather once said about Confucius traveling around the world with thousands of disciples. He quickly entered and arrived at the mansion. The window and door turned towards his grandfather, and he told him what had happened outside. Upon hearing this, Li, the old man, immediately stood up and asked his maid to help him pack up. He then waved his hand and asked the errand runners to call for his eldest and second sons. After grinding for about half an hour, this person finally opened the door and walked out of the mansion. After arriving outside the mansion, Mr. Li raised his head and saw a vast team of people and horses. It is obvious that Mr. Li has only 6 or 7 people following him, and compared to the more than 100 people following Zhou Yuan, he definitely does not have much advantage in terms of momentum. Excuse me, sir, what are your names and taboos? Mr. Li arched his hand in front of him. Zhou Yuan said, My name is Zhou Yuan. I came late today not for anything else, but to give Mr. Li a chance to achieve great wealth and prosperity. Seize this opportunity, and Mr. Li may become successful in this small Yizhou. Mr. Li was startled by these words. What do you mean? Is it difficult for this person in front of him to want to rebel against today's Governor Zhang Yu? If he rebelled, he would definitely not be willing to do it, as he would put all his family's wealth and life on his belt. As a landlord, he definitely wants a stable one. Zhou Yuan wants to rebel. Anyway, just don't bring me along. Mr. Li, let's see that there is still an uncultivated wasteland on the plain. I heard that the wasteland belongs to Mr. Li, and what we mean is that we want to buy that piece of land from you, Zhou Yuan said to the landlord. Landlord Li breathed a sigh of relief. It was not enough to rebel. As for buying land, this can also be discussed. I'll sell that piece of wasteland as a whole to you, and you can offer 10,000 taels of silver. 10,000 taels of silver. This can be considered a tough beating on Zhou Yuan. First of all, it's not a good piece of land. 80% of that land is wasteland, and 20% is mountainous. If you want to cultivate land, you need to invest a lot of manpower to cultivate it. This 1 million taels of silver is enough to buy dozens of acres of cultivated land. Use this 100 taels of silver to buy this kind of wasteland, hehe. Zhou Yuan nodded and said, I'm out of 10,000 taels of silver, which can be considered as making friends with Mr. Li. From now on, we will be neighbors, and I want to establish a farm there. Mr. Li immediately understood what the person in front of him wanted to do. After delivering the money with both hands, Zhou Yuan and Mr. Li, a native of the world, completed the transaction. Where does Zhou Yuan's silver come from? The spaceship behind him has the ability to modify biological genes. By inputting genetic codes, he can transform materials on Earth, such as stones, into the materials he needs. As I just said, precious metals in the future will be turned into gold by spacecraft. After obtaining this piece of wasteland, Zhou Yuan built very exaggerated buildings here, logging in the mountains and building one wooden house after another, which connected into one piece. Formed a complex of buildings. The people of Xinzhuang looked at the wooden house from a distance, and couldn't help but feel a hint of envy in their hearts. Take a look at your house again, thatched house, rammed earth structure, leaking snow in winter and rain in summer. Chapter 3. Developed agricultural techniques. Steam rotary plow machine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Developed agricultural techniques. Steam rotary plow machine. On this day, Zhang Yu sat in his own home, with a high wall made of blue stones and a fish swimming back and forth in the big cauldron, feeling quite happy. Zhang Yu sat in such an environment, feeling extremely comfortable for a moment. Next to them are several of my own students and staff. They are reporting on what has happened in Yizhou these days for themselves. What? Report to me about small places like Li Family Village. Is it possible that tomorrow your family lost a dog and also report to the prefect? Zhang Yu stared silently at the student in front of him. Upon hearing these words, the student surnamed Li quickly took a few steps back and bowed, saying, It's not that I'm making a big fuss, but that this matter is really strange everywhere. Sir, that Zhou Yuan has a total of 300 students under his command, all of whom are talented in literature, martial arts, astronomy, and geography. As a student under my master's command, I naturally want to consider his future. At this moment, I am a big man and have fallen into a chaotic era. If you want to show your strength in this chaotic era, you naturally need to accommodate this talent for your own use, said Mr. Li. After Mr. Li finished speaking, Zhang Yu couldn't help but muster some energy and lifted his eyelids, saying, What do you mean is that Zhou Yuan seems to be a capable person. But no matter how capable he is, he's just a humble person from a humble background. After Zhang Yu finished speaking, Mr. Li was completely dumbfounded, just when he wanted to say something more. Governor Zhang, a convoy of carriages has arrived outside our door. Zhang Yu's servant quickly ran out of the door and knelt on the ground to report. After hearing these words, Zhang Yu couldn't help but be stunned. He stood up directly from the straw mat and stared at the servant in front of him with great confusion. The domestic slave was also very shocked by this. He said that the pair of carriages coming from outside were filled with gold and silver. Zhang Yu walked towards the door. Arriving outside the door, Zhang Yu looked up at the vast convoy of carriages ahead, with about 6 or 7 vehicles. Zhang Yu walked over to the horse's side, pointed to the carriage, and let the student next to him pass by. Mr. Li, whose surname is Li, walked forward and reached out his hand to lift the cloth on the carriage. It revealed the gold and silver treasures filled on it. Li Jiazuan, Zhou Yuan, ordered me to visit Governor Zhang of Zhangyu. Please accept this gift and take good care of us in the future. A man wearing a white Confucian robe walked out from the front of the carriage convoy. This person has sword eyebrows and starry eyes, and when he smiles on his face, his pure white teeth make Zhang Yu feel envious. Because Zhang Yu's teeth are not so white, his sword eyebrows and starry eyes are really a handsome man, making people feel happy when they look at him. Sir, such a great gift. Why on earth? If there's anything, just let me know. I'll take care of this place alone. Zhang Yu meant that this was his base, so there's no need to beat around the bush if there's anything. The person smiled slightly and said, "My name is Lu Sanshi, and I am just a servant under Mr. Zhou Yuan's command. I came here today just to make it clear to Mr. Zhang Yu that we may come to Yizhou city tomorrow to recruit craftsmen." Recruiting craftsmen. 6 or 30. Does this name have the same origin? I always feel like I've developed a habit. This name is the most despicable one. In this era, among the Han Dynasty, a 2-character name is considered authentic, while a 3-character name is considered a lowly name. Only those from humble backgrounds, and even those with such a name from a prominent family, generally do not think that this name is ostentatious. 30, this is a number, which makes it even more apparent that this person's background is low and cannot be a lower slave. Sir, with his extraordinary speech, is it possible that he was born a slave? That's why he hasn't been released from slavery yet. Zhang Yu still had doubts in his heart, as he saw that the person in front of him was a very intelligent but capable person. How can a person of this quality still be just a slave now? Mr. Zhou Yuan is my master. He gave me this name, perhaps to distinguish us, replied Lu Shisan with a chuckle. Zhang Yu felt that the person in front of him seemed a bit lowly. He just frowned, not as good as the guy in front of you who was hospitalized and became a slave. After saying something, he turned around and said, Zhou Yuan wants to recruit residents of this city to become craftsmen. For the sake of business reputation, let him enter the city. 630 bowed and said, "Thank you, Governor Zhang." Zhang Yu thought this matter was just a small matter, but he didn't expect that the next day, Lu Sanshi would bring many handsome people, all dressed in literati costumes, but all of them were slaves under Zhou Yuan's hands. They came to the city, recruiting residents who came and went. The residents here are all small business people because most of the farmers live in the outer city. Zhou Yuan liked the progressiveness nature of the people in this place. After all, the farmer market living in the outer city was too conservative. It's really difficult to get them into the factory opened by Zhou Yuan. However, the people here can be absorbed into the factory. On the first day, when Lu Shisan shouted, he only recruited 10 people. There was only one factory that was dead, and they arranged to inform them that the factory managed 3 meals a day and could earn 4 taels of silver and 2 bags of rice per month. I was instantly excited and got up to work in the factory for a month. They were mainly building farms and cultivating land. The genetic modification personnel on Zhou Yuan's side have developed agricultural steam tractors, and they can use them by installing automatic steam plows in the back. The recruited people are simply unable to operate this kind of thing. Zhou Yuan arranged 3 or 4 reformers here to teach these people how to use this machine. At first, these people were also startled. There were so many terrifying things, there were no horses or cows left. They roared and plowed the wasteland into arable land. They carefully ran forward and squatted down to find that seeds had already been planted in those lands. When did farming become so easy? These people all had strange expressions on their faces and stood up in fear. Farming like this is really easy. In the past, my family needed to cultivate the land together, plant seeds, and it would take at least 4 to 5 days. Our family was small, only 4 people, and we could only cultivate a small amount of paper currency. If we could use this thing, we could cultivate 10 times the land, plant 10 times the harvest, and 10 times the food. Zhang Yu was extremely excited. As a waiter who used to run errands in a restaurant in the city, there were actually younger brothers at home, but they were all entrusted to him. He came to the city alone and helped his family buy some salt, bamboo slips, and so on. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 4. Agricultural revitalization. Population loss in Yizhou City. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Upon hearing these words, Li Er beside him couldn't help but widen his eyes and became excited, saying, "If we steal this thing from here and transport it to our own small village, can we all become landlords one by one?" After Li Er finished speaking, everyone present stopped speaking, their eyes red one by one. This thing is very good. It's just a farming tool. These people, with different thoughts and whims, began to bury their heads and work hard. They can't do anything day by day. Every morning, 10 people each receive a bucket of water and come to the edge of the field to sprinkle the water evenly on the field. Sprinkle once in the morning, once at noon, and once at night. There are 3 times in total, and if you say tired, it's not tiring either. When it comes to their main job, it's actually not these things. Their main job is actually learning, which is a very powerful agricultural tool in their eyes. Learning how to operate and use, they have been learning enthusiastically in the past few days. At first, they held on to it. After all, to steal this thing, they had to operate it. Learn more about it, and then steal it out after learning it, which is the most perfect way. But later on, they changed their thoughts and seemed to not want to run away. 3 meals a day, rice porridge and eggs in the morning, big mantou, and fried meat with vegetables. At noon, there are 2 dishes and 1 meat. Meat includes chicken, beef, and pork. Noodles and rice are eaten casually. At night, there is rice and soup, mostly broth. This is 3 meals a day. For farmers in the 3 Kingdoms period, this treatment was better than that of landlords, especially after they ate the food on their plates and noodles in their bowls. They were all stunned. They think their previous idea of trying to escape from here was very foolish. On this day, Zhang Yu, Li Er and other people, after a day of study and work, went to the farm cafeteria. At 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun shone on the ground, and the entire ground was golden. "Help me make some more soup. Madam, please give me some more meat. How come I only have 6 pieces of meat? I see that big cow has 7 pieces of meat. Do you like to eat or not? If you don't eat, go away. How much work do you do? How much work does Zhang Yu do? Do you learn fast or does Zhang Yu learn fast? If it weren't for Zhang Yu, could our collective wages increase by 1 or 2 per month? Brother Yu did a good job. He works brightly. If we continue to do this in the future, maybe our boss will give us more wages." The waves of noise express the way of life here, which may be conflicting or dissatisfied, but it is very comfortable and happy. Being able to live such a hopeful life in this chaotic world. Zhang Yu held his plate and sat on a chair next to a wooden table. He placed the plate in his hand on the table and made a loud metal collision sound. Yes, the plate in his hand was an iron plate. It can also be said to be a stainless steel plate. Zhang Yu doesn't know how this plate was made, but it doesn't have any rust. Zhang Yu held an iron spoon in his hand and looked at the food on the plate, stir-frying vegetables, tomatoes, and pork ribs. And seaweed soup. Zhang Yu ate in big gulps, and after finishing, he went to the place where he cooked and brought himself a bowl of rice. After finishing his meal, he carefully put the iron plate into the washing basin, turned around and was about to leave when a figure closely followed Zhang Yu over. "Brother Zhang, these days you seem to have no energy at all. You've been thinking about how to work and how to do it well. Have you forgotten our previous agreement?" Li Er quickly walked over, with an urgent expression on his face and a heavy heart, as if he wanted to clarify these words today. In Li Er's heart, he had already given up the idea of stealing the tractor. Zhang Yu and his team want to steal the tractor, which is simply a fantasy. If they really do these things, then I probably won't be able to stay here anymore. I must stop these people and tell them that I have parted ways with them. Li Er, you don't have to tell me anymore. I won't think about stealing that tractor anymore. We can receive 10 taels of silver every month, and 1 year later it will be 120 taels. I asked my husband, and the price of that tractor happens to be only 120 taels. If I stay here for a year, I can get a tractor for nothing, and it's just a matter of fairness and justice. Why should I steal it? And then hide my name? Isn't this a crazy approach? Zhang Yu poured all the thoughts he had in his heart into a bamboo tube and said to Lier. After hearing this, Lier couldn't help but widen his eyes and said, "My dear friend, Brother Daniu, I have the same idea. We are all honest farmers, and we cannot do that kind of theft. We are not thieves, do you think so?" This statement is pure nonsense. The saying goes that out of poverty and bad waters, there are simply troublemakers. It's only because they have lived a good life and are not willing to live a good life, that they are reluctant to leave here. In addition, the gentleman here, dressed in the clothes of literati officials, explained to them every day the good days and plans for the future, saying that all the agricultural tools in this farm will be supplied to their own people and will be very cheap. For example, the tractor only costs 120 silver. For example, the rotary tiller can be obtained with 30 silver. These farmers suddenly became angry with the idea of working here for 2 or 3 years before leaving, but they didn't know that even if they worked here for 2 or 3 years, they couldn't leave because tractors and rotary tillers needed oil. If there is no power source, these things can only lie down and cannot be used at all. Their only way to make money is to work here. However, these people feel that working here is very good, and the treatment is higher than anywhere else outside. This is simply the treatment of the landlord. Zhang Yu recently discovered something that raised his sense of crisis. In the city of Yizhou, surprisingly, many residents did not engage in small businesses, but instead rushed out of the city, with 11,000 people flocking to the factory opened by Zhou Yuan Kai in Lijia village. I heard that Zhou Yuan surrounded many mountains and farmland there, and cultivated them all. He just waited for these people to become shops and farm. The wages and food provided are very sufficient. Spending these precarious days together in the city makes it much stronger to start a small business, at least very stable, without worrying about starving to death. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 5. Yielding 5,000 catties per mu. Forcing farmers to become workers. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Zhang Yu felt a sense of crisis in his heart. One day, he called over one of his attendants and said, "Zhou Yuan seems to be ambitious and wants to attract all the people in our city to their remote and impoverished areas. You spread the rumors with the aim of preventing those people from entering Zhou Yuan's farm." The attendant nodded and turned around to leave directly. Zhang Yu thinks this is very effective. During the Three Kingdoms period, the local tycoons like Zhang Yu held all the discourse power in the region. Those ordinary people who can be tricked with just a few words can follow them. Even dying for oneself. As long as Zhang Yu spreads rumors, no one will enter Zhou Yuan farm. The next day, he realized that he couldn't stop all of this, and the people under his command flooded into Li family village. Several families are happy, while others are worried. Li family village is a very happy side. Originally, Li Laozhu regretted selling the land and felt that selling it in this way was very inappropriate. This was to establish a competitor for himself. Until a large number of people flooded into Zhou Yuan's farm, Li family village became popular here. The influx of a large population has led to many people passing by in Lijiazhuang every day. Some city residents who pass by have even set up street stalls in Lijiazhuang, and those ordinary people in Lijiazhuang initially sneered at it, thinking it was just a small business. As a result, seeing the small street vendors' money rolling in, these ordinary people instantly turned red in the eyes. How can one earn so much money? Originally, it was a factory opened by Zhou Yuan, which gave many farmers who worked in the factory money. Since they had money, they needed to have space to spend it. Although some people saved all their money and were not willing to spend it at all. However, even so, out of a farm with a population of 1,000 and 2,000, at least 500 people can be gathered to spend money recklessly. They can contribute 10 taels of silver every month, 500 people, 10 taels of silver, so the stable monthly flow in Yizhou is 5,000. Everyone earns 5,000 yuan based on their abilities, some sell vegetables and fruits, some sell fabrics and brocades, and try their best to put that 5,000 yuan into their pockets. These people in Yizhou, even if they don't work or set up stalls, can earn 3 taels of silver a month for nothing by simply renting their big houses to merchants or a firewood house. Some merchants who came here in admiration even decided to open a storefront here and run a restaurant or something. Suddenly, this place became lively. Zhang Yu was quite angry about this. One day, he arrived at the outskirts of the farm and looked up at the huge farm in front of him. Then I saw a tractor plowing in the field. What kind of tank is this? If we were to use such a tank on the battlefield, it could really be disadvantageous. Zhang Yu's eyes were bright as he gazed at the automatic tank in front of him, which had no code or cow. But this is just a farming tool and has nothing to do with war. Zhou Yuan learned from outside that since Zhang Yu had come to visit him at the main entrance, it was considered an official visit. Zhou Yuan was somewhat surprised by this, but didn't say anything. Let the genetically modified person Lu Sanshi lead Zhang Yu around the farm. Turning around for me, Zhang Yu's expression became increasingly surprised. You said that the wheat in this farmland, as well as the sweet potato you mentioned, can be harvested in a month. How could it be? How could there be such high-quality rice seeds? How could there be such a level of food? Zhang Yu is completely foolish. How did he grow this kind of food? If this food is promoted, will the population of the world still double and increase? Zhang Yu's whole body trembled with fear. After seeing this scene next to him, Lu Sanshi couldn't help but smile and said, Mr. Zhang Yu, our Zhou Yuan boss said that as long as we give him enough people, he will package all the food in Yizhou. From then on, there will be no more famine in Yizhou. Upon hearing these words, he felt as if he had been electrocuted on his finger, his eyes burning with surprise, and he couldn't help but say, Mr. Zhou Yuan is willing to promote grain cultivation. This is our master's idea, and we will definitely do this, said Lu Shisan, shaking his head, but this is not something that needs to be done now, and it will only be done in the near future, said Lu Shishi. Zhang Yu has some regrets about this. This is a good thing that benefits the country and the people. We must do this kind of thing, and the faster we do it, the better. Zhang Yu patted Lu San's shoulder with his hand. Lu Shisan remained silent about this and was in a daze, sending the data in his mind to the spacecraft terminal on Zhou Yuan's side. After learning all of this on board the spaceship, Zhou Yuan couldn't help but smile faintly. The so-called economic foundation determines the superstructure, and the biggest economic foundation in the Three Kingdoms era is actually the problem of everyone not having enough to eat. As long as everyone has enough to eat, they can't help but show their economic skills for an hour, and decide to build the largest economic foundation in the Three Kingdoms era in Shangcheng. In fact, it is the problem of everyone not having enough to eat, as long as everyone has enough to eat. So everything I want to do will be possible. Truly capable factories that can produce light and even heavy industrial goods will rise here. As long as everyone can have enough to eat, they will not want to live a better life. Although Zhang Yu is very unhappy. Zhou Yuan wants people in the dark to control the entire food source of Yizhou. But he can have so much food that at least the people in these places can eat enough and not starve to death directly. Zhou Yuan is a person worth cooperating with. Brother Lucia, such good deeds that benefit the country and the people, as the governor of the region, I naturally want to promote development, said Zhang Yu. Zhang Yu let go of his attitude. Bring along one's own followers. Leaving this farm cleanly and decisively. Zhang Yu, in history, predicted Liu Bei. A god who cannot revive the Han Dynasty and cannot easily die. When facing the common people, there is surprisingly exceptional tolerance and kindness, full of humanistic care. Zhang Yu turned around and left this place. Although he left, he brought the opening of Yizhou to Lijia village. During these 4 or 5 months, Zhou Yuan crazily cultivated land, and Zhang Yu also cooperated with Zhou Yuan to cultivate various lands. Almost all the wasteland in Yizhou was reclaimed. The high-quality grain seeds in Zhou Yuan's hand can achieve a yield of 5,000 kilograms per mu. The yield of 5,000 kilograms of grain per mu occupies 30% of the arable land in Yizhou, which has greatly improved the environment where there is already not enough food to eat and people are prone to starvation. Although low grain prices harm farmers, if one cannot eat enough, they will starve to death. There are 2 options. Natural selection, which causes less damage. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 6. Filial Piety and Honesty. Radio. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Filial Piety and Honesty. Radio. Zhou Yuan once again arrived in Yizhou, the territory of Zhang Yu. After arriving in the city, Zhou Yuan allowed the renovated people to enter the streets and alleys of the city. In the streets and alleys, there are figures of renovation workers who purchase many things needed in the base. For example, land deeds. Purchase these fields in large quantities and recruit talents from all walks of life. When Zhou Yuan was recruiting talents from various sources, he discovered a very fatal thing, which was that during the Three Kingdoms period, there were actually not many scholars, especially those from poor families. Most people inherit poetry and books, and those from aristocratic families have the ability to have humor, which is why they are able to read. After all, bamboo slips are quite rare and not a resource that ordinary scholars can obtain. The era when the number of true readers skyrocketed was when papermaking was perfected, making books a slightly cheaper thing. Although not everyone could afford them, it could not be the price of books from later generations. But even so, it can still be said that there are quite a few, which is why the imperial examination system gradually emerged in society, replacing the system of filial piety and integrity. Now belongs to an era where the school alliance system is widely practiced. It was during the northern and southern dynasties that the number of humble scholars gradually increased. If Zhou Yuan wanted to recruit local literati, the first way would be to promote printing technology so that all the feudal lords on the Central Plains would use printing technology to print books. This way, the number of scholars would increase. But he didn't plan on doing this because it would easily touch upon the interests of certain interest groups, which would immediately attract attacks from these interest groups and create a lot of trouble. We should cooperate with these interest groups to share the benefits and steadily develop through the previous beginner stage before proceeding. After all, Zhou Yuan now only has nearly 1,000 clones. Zhou Yuan did a very outrageous thing, he directly gifted his grain seeds to the local landlord. The local landlord suddenly obtained this very high-yield variety, and at first he was a bit skeptical. Zhou Yuan should have been a scammer until they were invited by Zhou Yuan to personally come to the farm. I saw grains that ripen in a month, which can ripen more than 10 times a year, and wheat and rice that harvest more than 10 times, as well as potatoes and sweet potatoes. Zhou Yuan, how did you get these grain seeds? Could it be that they were given to you by immortals? Said a landlord with an incredulous expression on his face. Several other local-style gods and tycoons also looked at each other incessantly, nodding to feel a strange aura emanating from this fact. Zhou Yuan only said, I am not giving you this thing to fatten you up, but to ensure that the suffering people under your hands can have enough to eat, so that they can have more children. My only goal is to increase the population. For those landlords, what Zhou Yuan said is very reasonable. In a cold weapon agricultural country, having a large population is a manifestation of strong national strength. The more population, the stronger the national strength. The logical thinking of Zhou Yuan is very correct and reasonable. Most of these landlords have some hatred towards Zhou Yuan. This person has produced high-quality seeds. And with so many talents. This indicates that this person has the ability to threaten their local interests. Just based on this, one must be careful. Zhou Yuan doesn't know what these people are thinking inside their hearts. If he knew about their thoughts, he would definitely feel very frustrated. I clearly did a very selfless thing and gave my great interests to these insects. However, these people still don't remember their own good, and their first thought in their hearts is to kill Zhou Yuan whenever they have the opportunity. Zhou Yuan currently doesn't know all of this, but he doesn't care about it either. Having a large number of people makes everything easier for him, and he just wants to use these landlords, not seek any benefits for them. Next is a period of stable development, and Zhou Yuan has no population in front of him, so he can only develop some luxury goods. Mr. Zhou Yuan, our wireless communication function has developed to a considerable extent now. We have developed wireless signal satellites and hand-cranked power radios, which can become luxury goods and be sold to the surrounding feudal lords. Zhou Yuan looked at the eager expression in the eyes of the clone in front of him. Lu 49, the person in charge of solar, wind, and thermal power projects, had actually started this kind of thing now. Zhou Yuan felt that this matter was also very normal. The current group of clones within Zhou Yuan are all thinking about running the factory. The biggest obstacle to running the factory is not technological backwardness or marketing backwardness, but orders. As long as you have an order, you can go crazy with production and have the motivation to continue developing. It is impossible for Lu 49 to sell the things he currently produces to ordinary civilians, because these people cannot even afford to eat, and it is obviously unrealistic for them to consume. So he could only focus his audience on wealthy feudal lords and produce some excellent luxury goods. You should try your best to produce. We need to shrink and develop in this small area for at least 5 or 6 years, and we need a lot of gold and silver treasures. Zhou Yuan gave an order to Lu 49. Make money. Get the money, everything is easy to say. After receiving the order, Lu 49 left. So in addition to the farm and tool factory, the small Yizhou also had an additional radio airport. Producing this very low-end radio is a very simple task. Zhou Yuan already has the spaceship and various tools in his hands. As long as he takes over the material, he can build as much as he wants. After producing the samples, Zhou Yuan asked his subordinates to send some to Zhang Yu. Zhang Yu heard the small box in his hand and surprisingly made a sound. First, I dismantled one and found that there were no small people inside. Afterwards, I felt developed. Give me a little more Zhou Yuan, I'll buy you one for 1,000 taels of silver. Zhou Yuan happily agreed to this and said, Zhang Taisho wants to spread this thing as soon as possible. The more people we use it, the more money we will get. After hearing these words, Zhang Yu did not slack off and ordered his literati, students, and advisors to bring this hand-cranked power radio to the territories of various feudal lords. Chao, since swallowing Xinzhuang and Shuzhou in one gulp, has separated the north from the south. In the north, he will face the central plains feudal lords like bones in a tomb. And in his view, the south is just a group of uneasy rodents. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 7. The Han News Broadcast. Interview with Zhang Yu condemning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Han News Broadcast. Interview with Zhang Yu condemning Chao in Chao's territory. Liu Bei has been here for a long time. When he came here, Liu Bei set a main tone, which was not to provoke trouble. And these days, the father-in-law of the emperor, Uncle Dong. I found him and said that the Empress Dowager would pass on the imperial edict to the world, asking Liu Bei to sign it. Liu Bei himself believed that he was a relative of the Han family, so it was impossible to refuse this matter. So he signed on the belt. After signing, he regretted it. He felt that he shouldn't have been so reckless and risked his life, and now he was in a dilemma. So he has been farming in the farm that Chao gave him these past few days. His two brothers are certainly puzzled by this, but there is no other way but to use daily practice to alleviate the anxiety in their hearts. On this day, Liu Bei was busy and worried in the field, constantly thinking about the issue of the dress code in his mind. I was thinking in my heart about thinking about Chao. I must not discover this matter in the past few days, otherwise my life will definitely be in danger. Whatever you think, Zhang Liao, the fierce general under Chao's command, appeared before his eyes at some point. Brother Xuande, please, my lord, Zhang Liao said with a clasped fist. Liu Bei felt a sudden surge in his heart, feeling that something was not going well. However, the three brothers had a good relationship with Zhang Liao in front of him. If it weren't for what his second brother said, the grass on the grave would have grown 3 times taller by now. Zhang Liao exchanged a glance with Liu Bei. Liu Bei knew he couldn't refuse, so he could only be taken away by Zhang Liao in a daze and came to a pavilion with a heavy heart. There, Chao had been waiting for a long time. Liu Bei sat still. 2 feudal lords from the late Han Dynasty looked at each other. Brother Xuande, I have received something good in the past few days. Chao clapped his hands. It turned out that there were several maids standing beside him, and one of them had an outstretched hand holding a box of things. Redwood lacquer box, with a small gold lock on top, looks very exquisite. What treasure is inside? Can it be that Chao Mengde called himself over today to see this precious thing show off in front of him? At this moment, upon hearing the clapping of Chao's hands, the maid opened the lock of the box she was holding in her hand, revealing the contents inside. That is a strange rectangular object, with a shell made of wood and a very strange thing on the front. Liu Bei doesn't know what that thing is, but its name is actually called a trumpet mouth. There are also some small bumps on top, like bumps, which are buttons. This object can emit human voices, like a storyteller, and can also achieve the effect of being a scholar who knows the world's affairs without going out, Chao said. I pressed the button on top of the rectangle. A series of clattering sounds indeed came from the small wooden box. This was the sound of snowflakes, and Liu Bei couldn't help but stand up. Although it was not a human voice, it was also surprising. This small object can actually make a sound inside. How was it done? Before Liu Bei could react, the sound of a real person speaking came from inside the wooden box. With the support of Duke Mu of Qin, Gongzi Chong'er entered Jin and, like a pie falling from the sky, gained a beautiful land. The Iron Curtain fell, and the era of Jin's hegemon began. If you want to know how the hegemon Chong'er governed Jin, please listen to the next chapter's analysis. Liu Bei stood up from the ground and took a few steps back in fear. The sound coming from the radio made him fearful. This is a radio that is said to have flowed out from the governor of Yizhou, Zhang Yu. It's called a radio, and I also got a few. Yesterday, I was amazed by this amazing thing, so today, I want to share it with Brother Xuande. Chao also became serious. Next, another person's voice came from the radio. Just now, I was telling a book called The Chronicles of the Eastern Zhou Dynasty, which tells the story of the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period. It's not boring, it's quite interesting. Chao said, this time should be broadcasting that so-called news program. Chao must have listened to the radio for many days. Otherwise, it is impossible to explain which news is broadcasted during which time period so clearly. On July 13, 199, the next 2 days of the Ming Dynasty, it will be sunny in Yizhou, but there will be 3 days of rainstorm in Guangzhou, and typhoon in Qinzhou, Yangzhou. We need to be careful. The flood in Huguang will subside in the near future, and the temperature difference between day and night in Liaodong will be great. Please pay attention. On the radio, there came a beautiful woman's voice, which was very gentle and peaceful, but her words were clear. Liu Bei was dumbfounded. The news broadcasted in this so-called broadcast had some unfamiliar words, but he could roughly understand what the content was. Is this the weather forecast for the next 2 days after tomorrow? Nonsense. Is the weather predictable? His weather forecasting function is really accurate. You can take a look tomorrow and see that we are currently in the Guangzhou area. There will definitely be heavy rain tomorrow, don't worry, Chao said. Liu Bei fell silent directly. With the function of this weather forecast alone, this radio can be called a divine artifact. Next. The feudal lords and Prime Minister Chao annexed Xuzhou and Qingzhou. Since the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the overall situation of the world has slipped to a stage where division and division are inevitable and division and division are inevitable. The feudal lords rose up together, and the 16 lords attacked Dongzhuo. Dongzhuo was ultimately defeated, and Chao gained Dongzhuo's territory. He worked hard and today he advanced into Qingzhou, Xuzhou with troops. After obtaining these 2 territories, he also captured the local vassal Liu Bei. The sound coming from the radio made Liu Bei's forehead covered in cold sweat, and his face showed a look of fear. This is the news. It talks about recent events. They will use this radio to report to us. We can even hear news from Liaodong in the Guangzhou area. This is the fastest way to get news without using official channels. Chao clearly used this radio to get a lot of information these days. When he said these words, he couldn't help but feel proud, as if he had made this radio. Of course, it is also possible that the news being broadcasted now features him as Prime Minister Chao, which is why he exudes such a sense of empathy and flaunting himself. However, Chao painstakingly killed many ordinary people. Although it did not cause a bloody situation, it was also extremely cruel. The Han broadcasting station condemned it and hoped that the feudal lords Chao would calm down and not add to the killing while leading beasts and cannibalism. Below is an interview with the governor of Yizhou, Mr. Zhang Yu, about this matter. Chao's face turned black and he slammed the table fiercely. Liu Bei's face was also very abnormal. I want to take a look. How did Zhang Yu evaluate me in this so-called interview? Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 8. Various Marquises. Reporter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Various Marquises. Reporter, what kind of person is Chao? Zhang Yu said meaningfully, this person harbors wolf-like ambitions in his heart, definitely wanting to overthrow the Han Dynasty. Everyone must be vigilant about this person. From this massacre, it can be seen that this person is unjust. If he comes to Xuzhou or other aristocratic families in Xuzhou again, if the aristocrats resist him, he will not hesitate to slaughter those aristocratic families' aristocrats. When Zhang Yu said these words, he looked serious, but the radio couldn't capture the serious expression on his face, and couldn't present the hatred in his eyes to Chao and Liu Bei. But Chao was infuriated by these words. How could Zhang Yu say that to him? You should know that Chao knew when he got this radio. Not only did he get it, but countless feudal lords in the territory of the Han Dynasty owned this thing. It's equivalent to saying that Zhang Yu now claims to be a cruel and unrestrained person in front of all the feudal lords, even in front of the advisors, soldiers, and talents under their command. Next to him, Liu Bei looked at Chao with a strange expression, his face pale with anger. I feel very happy in my heart, but my face is very serious. Nonsense, what kind of person is Chao Gong? Liu Bei reluctantly said something against his heart and then stopped speaking. Chao endured the anger in his heart and remained silent, listening to the sound on the radio. Master, should I turn it off? Zhang Liao next to him wiped a cold sweat and said to Chao in front of him. Chao waved his hand and said, "It's okay, let him continue speaking." Chao can sometimes be very magnanimous. Liu Bei also remained silent and did not express any opinions on this matter. So we all have to resist this person, because apart from Chao and Sun Su from Jiangdong, none of the feudal lords in the world can succeed. Our strength is very small, and we must unite and maintain our current state of being able to protect ourselves. Zhang Yu's voice came again, and Chao broke through the defense directly. What does this mean? Is this to persuade everyone to form an alliance and attack themselves and Sun Su together? Is this ruining one's own Wang Tu hegemony? Zhang Yu, I will kill this person. Chao shouted loudly. His servants around him all knelt on the ground one by one. Liu Bei quickly stood up and could only stand there listening. The series of speeches by Zhang Yu has ended, and now comes the second news. Marquis Yuan Shao and Liaodong Gongsun Zan clashed in Liaodong. The introduction of high-yield grain seeds by the royal family Lu Zhang in the Sichuan region is likely to transform the region from a Pingliang area to a grain-producing area. Will the various lords of the Lu family in the Han Dynasty, like the lords surnamed Ji during the Eastern Zhou Dynasty, fight their own battles and ultimately bury the name of the Zhou Emperor in the dust of history with their own hands? A series of news poured out like flowing water, and Liu Bei and Chao listened to the sound. For a moment, their brows furrowed tightly, and a storm surged in their hearts. What is this high-yield grain seed? Can we introduce it into our territory so that we can promote agricultural development? Liu Bei commented on this. If there really is such a mythical grain seed, then why has Zhang Yu been living in the Sichuan and Sichuan regions? He should have gone north to occupy Longxi County so that he can continue to devour the territory. If he directly nests in the Sichuan and Sichuan regions, he will never be able to plan for the great cause of the world. In Chao's eyes, he already had a very complete set of criteria for judging the world. His way of judging others is like this. As long as the person's identity, personality, and territory are brought into this standard, a very complete answer can be obtained. Zhang Yu's personality is not something that can be satisfied in just one place. He is also an extremely greedy and ambitious person. If he really had this ability, he wouldn't have been hiding in the Sichuan region without coming out. But Liu Bei's idea is very simple. He doesn't want to leave Sichuan, and it is likely because he is in an important stage of development. Developing agriculture cannot make him fat at once, and it is impossible to win a city today like in war, that is, to control a city. Developing agriculture should also take at least 1 year. But Liu Bei was still delayed by his inherent cognition. He didn't know how long the high-yield grain seed would mature, but it was a high-yield seed that matured once a month. Zhang Yu belonged to the feudal lords who were the first to cultivate this high-yield crop, and he had already hoarded a terrifying amount of food. A group with stable logistics. Zhang Yu is not moving now, just because he has too few steel weapons in his hands. He now needs to purchase a large amount of steel, make steel weapons, and train cavalry. Cavalry is the king of war on the battlefield in this era of cold weapons. Jiangdong, the courtyard where Sun Su lives. Sun Su, Sun Quan, and a series of strategic advisors and generals from Jiangdong. In the pavilion of this courtyard, there is a table with a radio on top of it. In the radio, there were moving sounds of music that seemed a bit rough for people nowadays, and the sound quality was really poor, almost completely losing its quality. However, for someone from Jiangdong who was present, this is a novel experience. Big brother, Zhang Yu actually spoke frankly. We are on the same side as the Chao bandit, which really slanders us. We are all loyal ministers of the Han Dynasty, Sun Quan said to Sun Su. Upon hearing these words, Sun Tzu couldn't help but furrow his brows tightly. He didn't know what kind of person he was in his heart. There is no need to cover it up at all, he is a straightforward person. I actually think it's a good thing for me to put myself and Chao Chao on the same side, because it's equivalent to saying that it's me and Chao Chao. Both of us are heroes, and being able to become heroes in the world is not something to be happy about. Sun Tzu said, very open-minded. After Zhou Yuan established a radio factory, he also established a recording room for broadcasting radios and journalists. Journalists are a good thing, sometimes they may be lowly, like dogs, so they are called paparazzi. But sometimes journalists are a profession similar to that of literati in society, very glamorous and enviable. Especially now, after the radio became a treasure in the hands of those feudal lords, this so-called Great Han Southwest Broadcasting Station has become a place that many literati can go to. Here, become a journalist. Traveling around the territory of feudal lords brings various news. Then reveal your name in front of various feudal lords. Make a name for yourself. At the Southwest Broadcasting Station of the Great Han Dynasty, it is the fastest way to become famous worldwide. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 9. Ma Chao comes to North Sichuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Ma Chao comes to North Sichuan. Waves of hooves swayed in the wilderness, while Ma Chao rode a white horse, wearing armor and holding a long spear, running forward, panting heavily and exhausted to the extreme. Why did he run away? That's because behind him, someone is chasing him. A group of cavalry carrying the Chao flag, also dressed in armor, rushed forward and quickly brought Ma Chao closer. It's about to catch up with Ma Chao. Ma Chao turned back in fear and saw a group of soldiers from Chao camp rushing towards him. His father Ma Teng has already passed away during this time period. Chao Chao massacred their entire family and seized the Longxi region. He is now a defeated general, running towards the south, with his goal being the Sichuan region. Just want to run away. Child, it's my arrow. With a swoosh, a bow and arrow rushed forward. Ma Chao turned around and saw a black shadow quickly charging towards his eyebrows. Ma Chao swept his spear and the arrow was thrown away, hitting the ground. But at the same time. A few breaths of time. The Chao army chased after Ma Chao and quickly thrust their spears forward. Go to hell, kid. Ma Chao barely resisted, his spear constantly flipping over in his hand. Pop 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 pop. A very complete encirclement has been formed. Surrounded in the middle. Ma Chao was doomed as soon as he saw it, and he didn't want to die. Coincidentally, he also ran to a river at that moment. He jumped up and jumped directly into the river. The turbulent river water washed it towards the distance. Ma Chao was spinning and spinning in the water, before being thrown towards the cliff by the huge waterfall on camera. Ma Chao felt dizzy and bloated, spitting out the water from his mouth. After standing up from the ground, he found himself outside a fence. Inside the fence walls are large areas of farmland, which are planted in the mountains like stairs. This is the unique terraced field in Sichuan and Sichuan regions. Ma Chao stared curiously at all of this, with a surprised expression on his face. At this moment, bursts of footsteps suddenly came over, and Ma Chao was startled. He quickly picked up the one on the ground, grabbed his silver spear in his hand, and finally felt at ease in his heart. He watched cautiously as a group of people gathered around him. These people were all flipping over from inside the fence, holding strange things that seemed to be weapons. They aimed their guns at the assassin, Ma Chao wearing armor. I came here just by chance, and there was nothing malicious in my heart. Ma Chao took a few steps back cautiously, pointing his long gun at the people holding automatic rifles pointing at him. He doesn't know what an automatic rifle is. If he knew, he would throw the iron gun in his hand onto the ground and raise his hands to salute the founding army. By chance, did you come here? We suspect you're a detective. Come with us. One of them pointed his gun at him, and Ma Chao watched as he walked out. This person is not wearing armor, only holding the ordinary firearm in his hand, but wearing a vest that reveals his arm. This person's arm muscles are very exaggerated, wearing blue pants, a short white shirt, and clean short hair on their head. I said you don't move. Didn't you hear me clearly? Put down the weapon in your hand, said the strong and powerful god. Ma Chao was not afraid, he just straightened his waist and shouted louder, don't move around, and don't get close to me. The strong man pulled the trigger without hesitation, only heard a bang, and the automatic rifle instantly fired a shot, with a very obvious arc in the air. The sound of breaking through the air, as well as the sound of bullets and explosives being ignited. Everyone present became mentally alert one by one, and those holding automatic rifles would have followed suit if it weren't for their exceptional psychological resilience, as this is a very normal group effect. Ma Chao was not hit, but a stone next to him was hit, and a bullet hole appeared out of thin air on the stone. Ma Chao looked back at the bullet hole, then threw his shovel on the ground in fear and raised his hands. The strong man outlined a smile at the corner of his mouth and said, take him back and inform our master that a suspicious person has arrived outside the farm and is wandering here. This strong man is also one of the reformers. His name is Lu 60. I caught such a suspicious person today. In fact, he would catch 1 or 2 suspicious people every day. After all, there are too many people nearby who covet this land. Lu 60 catches people every day, and most of the time Zhou Yuan doesn't care. As the captain of the security team here, Lu 60 does report every time. Zhou Yuan seems to be idle today, and even after Lu 60 reports, he decides to go and take a look. When Zhou Yuan arrived here, he saw Ma Chao, who was tied up in various ways. Ma Chao also looked up at Zhou Yuan in front of him. The two of them looked at each other. What's your name? Zhou Yuan said calmly. Ma Chao's eyes were full of sharpness and he said, my name is Ma Chao, after Fubo Ma Yuan. Zhou Yuan instantly reacted and then showed a surprised expression on his face, saying, Ma Chao. Are you Ma Ting's son? After hearing his father's voice, Ma Chao couldn't help feeling a bit sad and lowered his head, not speaking. Well, I heard you were chased to the northern region of Sichuan, but I didn't expect you to come to my place. Okay, since you came to my place, I also need to entertain the descendants of General Fubo. Ma Chao lifted his head and Zhou Yuan's face showed a sincere expression. Ma Chao. How could Zhou Yuan not know about this person who has left a great reputation in history? Why not recruit this person under your own command? Ma Chao then became one of the members of the Yizhou security brigade. Ma Chao arrived at Yizhou and first changed into a new outfit. The previous armor was dragged down and replaced with a cool short coat, accompanied by a pistol. Ma Chao obtained a position on the farm as a security guard. He can only be a security guard now, and Ma Chao doesn't have much place to go, and there are also people chasing him outside. It would be great if someone could accommodate him, so he could only recognize the position by holding his nose and temporarily work as an ordinary security guard here. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 10. Ma Chao's medical treatment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Ma Chao's medical treatment. Isn't your waist painful? You should go check your body. Otherwise, if something happens in your body, you will regret it later. Nourishing oneself is like raising a tiger. When a tiger grows big, it will swallow you in one gulp. Lu 60 spoke seriously to Ma Chao, saying that the team members he had collected in the past few days were a very proud person. Ma Chao also had some fear about it. He was not afraid of death at first. After all, being young, the younger you are, the more you take your life seriously. But they encountered the tragic deaths of their parents and family members, drifting away. After the fact that there was only one person left, he had an impression of the fragility of life. I don't know why, but slowly, I'm afraid of death and I'm starting to cherish my life. Then I'll go check my body and find a doctor to help me with the examination. Ma Chao was said with some nervousness. After hearing these words beside him, Lu 60 patted the person's shoulder fiercely and loudly said, "What's the point of finding a doctor? You can go to the clinic above our estate. If you go there, there will naturally be someone to help you check, and it will be free of charge. You won't be charged a penny." Ma Chao could only grit his teeth about this, although he felt that finding a doctor to come and show him would be more reliable. But now he doesn't have a penny, so since that's the case, he can only go to a free place to take a look first. This can be considered better than nothing. Ma Chao arrived at the clinic. He first lay on a cold iron bed. A doctor wearing a white coat walked forward. Ma Chao looked up at the doctor in front of him and said, "Doctor, I don't know what kind of illness I have, I just feel pain in my lower back and eyes. Please help me take a look." Ma Chao looked at the man in front of him with a bewildered expression. He knew that his iron bed actually had a very strange structure. This structure is like a large iron box. Actually, there is a lid that can cover this iron bed. But if you cover this iron bed, what will it look like? An iron bed is not an iron bed, but directly turns into a coffin to lock people inside. This is so unlucky, but we haven't waited for Ma Chao to react yet. The doctor smiled and looked at the somewhat panicked man in front of him. The lid under the iron bed was pushed up, and then he smoothly put it on. Ma Chao was covered in it like this, as if in a coffin. He let out waves of screams and began to struggle. The doctor felt it outside the medical equipment. Ma Chao struggled non-stop in the medical equipment. He heard the waves of movement. He spoke up and said, "Don't panic or be afraid. Don't worry, I will definitely not harm you." Ma Chao was almost scared to death. With a pale face, he struggled and roared angrily, "You're not harming me. What does that mean?" The doctor did not give any explanation to the ancient person in front of him. Just reaching out and reaching for the button on the medical machine. I pressed the button once. The medical machine made a tinkling sound. This is electronic synthesizer. Ma Chao lay down in this anger, feeling like he wasn't lying on a doctor's bed. It's more like lying inside a coffin. The cold and gloomy aura that spreads to oneself from all directions. I couldn't help but shiver. Then a beam of red light suddenly lit up in front of his eyes. The red light scanned from his head until it stopped at the soles of his feet. Ma Chao felt that time had passed very long, but in fact, it was only 4 minutes. The sound of machines came in waves, and the steel coffin in front of Ma Chao slowly opened again. Ma Chao was finally able to step out of this strange instrument. He is very afraid of the cold touch of this thing. Ma Chao stood up, touched his legs and rubbed them a few times, as if feeling the cold. There is generally no problem with the body, but there is a slight tendency for the lumbar disc to protrude. You can take care of it by riding less horses in the past few days. The doctor wearing a white coat said to Ma Chao. Ma Chao didn't know what the doctor was muttering in his mouth. Finally, the doctor handed Ma Chao a clean white bill. Ma Chao left the room with a list in his hand in confusion. Under the guidance of the doctor, he arrived at another room. This room doesn't have that strange machine, but a serious table. Behind the table sat a doctor who was also wearing a white coat. The doctor wore a pair of glasses on his face, and his hair was the kind of white hair mixed with black hair. Ma Chao felt that the doctor himself was not very healthy, otherwise it wouldn't be this kind of hair. I have doubts about the doctor's medical skills. For your illness, go there and get some medicine. Just take it once a day, it's basically not a big problem. After the doctor finished speaking, he pulled out a piece of paper from the nearby desk and placed it on it. Long Fei Feng danced and wrote paragraphs of text. After placing it on the table, Ma Chao was sent away. After Ma Chao walked out of the room, unexpectedly, many people like him came to see a doctor. They are queuing up to the brim, if not because they arrived too early. I may also be one of those in such a large queue. Ma Chao couldn't help wiping the sweat off his forehead. Turn around and run away from this noisy place. After grabbing a few pairs of medicine, he returned to the farm. Is there no problem with his health? Ma Chao's current boss, Lu 60, came to his eyes. Lu 60 looked at Ma Chao. Ma Chao suddenly felt cared for. Then, realizing it later, this person was showing kindness to themselves and wanted to show gratitude in return. Ma Chao looked at Lu 60 in confusion. I dare not accept the kindness of the person in front of me. Ma Chao began his busy day. His job is relatively loose. Ma Chao basically has nothing to do. A leisurely day passed. Ma Chao also witnessed the temptation of 3 farm meals here. As a local aristocrat, Ma Chao has eaten something even better than the food in this place. But it doesn't have the strong taste of this place. The food he eats is mostly moderate and peaceful. And because during the Three Kingdoms period, most folk kitchenware was still made of bronze. Some kitchen utensils even use bronze cauldrons directly. The things cooked in an iron pot are naturally different from those cooked in a bronze cauldron. Ma Chao's lips and teeth lingered in fragrance. I just feel that the food here is not as difficult to accept as I imagined. Even with a unique flavor. At least there are many portions of oil and salt. No wonder we can train a village protection team of over 40 people, Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th.